So this video is a demonstration of the hands-on exam, the output for the hands-on exam, prelim exam. So to start, this is how my output looks like. So all of these elements are integrated via Bootstrap and designed, some are designed with CSS. So there are three components that we are tasked to create: the home component, the partners component, and the join us component. So for the home component, we have to use data binding, include a featured image and 4 cards with info. So here in the home component, as you can see, we have the nav tab, the featured image with some text here, and then these are the 4 cards. So let us check the source code for this project. So going to the project, which I named Prelim app, we go to the home component, and then I've used 3 files: the HTML file, the TypeScript file, and the CSS file. So for the HTML file, uh, this is how it looks like. So it's integrated with Bootstrap and some CSS. So let's check the TypeScript file. So for the home component, I've used interpolation, style binding, class binding, and event binding. So let's start with the interpolation. So basically, I've used string interpolation and then binding images, which is by using the URL or the relative path for that image here in assets. So um, you can see here that we have used the interpolation here in the images, as well as the description. Wait, let me check it first. I think it's here, description. And then next we have style binding. So for style binding, I've used these three: centered, font weight, and then the font sizes. So as you can see, this is an example. The text align, the font weight, the font size. So that's how style binding was used in the home component. Next, we have class binding. So for class binding, I've used CSS to style my elements in the HTML file. So first one is the background img and then the transparent box. So as you can see here, we have background one and then transbox one, which is a class that you can see inside the ECSS file. So here it is, background one and transbox one. Going back to the HTML file, you'll see here I've used this here. Wait, let me check. Uh, this one. The class equals background img. So this is the background image, the featured image, and then the trans box is where the text is inside. So this is a white background that has an opacity of 0.5. 0.5. So that's how class binding is used in the home component. And then lastly, we have event binding. So in event binding, I've only shown one, which is the click event or the show data event by clicking a button. So if we go here in my output, so you can see here, this one is the button that I use event binding. So if we go to developer tools, so there, once we click this button, as you can see here, button is clicked. There, that's event binding in the home component. And then next, we have the partners component. So for partners component, let me check. Um, I've used interpolation, style binding too, and then we have a new type of binding technique, which is property binding, and then two directives, ngIf Angular directive and then ng4 directive. So I've shown you interpolation. It's just simple. Uh, it's like the one we did in the home component, and then also the style binding. So let's go now to property binding. So let me show you first the partners component. So the partners component is this one, the table. And then going back to our file, we have property binding. So where did I use property binding? Property binding is used here in the target property of the A tag in the HTML file. So what does this do? So target property is used to link or to open the link in a new window or in the same window. So for example, since the A tag is in here, once we click the link, this one, it will open on a new tab. Unlike when we remove the target, let me show you for this first. So once we click view website, it will open the link on a new tab. But when we remove this, then save it, once we click this link, it will open on the same page. So that's how the target equals underscore blank works. So I've binded it in the HTML file using property binding. So, and then next we have ngIf directive. So I've included this just for demonstration purposes too, so that you can see how ngIf directive works. So I've used it here. There are two variables here in the TypeScript file, which is display table that has the Boolean value of true, and then no table that has the value false. So display table by default is true, so the table will be displayed. But once we change it to no table, save it, as you can see, the table vanished. So that's how ngIf directive works in the partners component file. Partners component. So there, balik na siya. And then we have lastly is the ng4 directive. So for ng4 directive, this is used to iterate on an array, which is this, the company R or the company array that has the values for every cell in the table. So we have the company, the trademark, the sponsorship, and the website. So this ng4 directive iterates through the contents of the array and displays it on the website or on the app. So there, this is the array, and then going to the HTML file, we have the ng4 directive. So that A of company R, A, that name, and then this one is a combination of interpolation and the ng4, and then this one interpolation 2, and then property binding, and then we have the href element or property that links that has the URL of the site. So that's it for the partners component. And then lastly, we have the join us component. So I've used the HTML and the TypeScript file here. So just like the same the first two components, I've also used interpolation and style binding here in this component. And then I've added two-way data binding and event binding in the form. So for two-way data binding to work, we have to import the forms module in the angular.json file, which can be found here. I'm sorry, not on the Angular JSON file. It's in the app module, app.module.typescript file. So there, import. So that's how the two-way data binding will work. So this is the declaration of the blank variables or blank elements or strings. And then going here, we have this inputs. Inputs. We have four inputs. First name, last name, email ad, and then the affiliation or institution. So two-way data binding for demonstration, let's check if it's working. So let me type something. As you can see, as I'm typing, the name is also printed out below. So then for email, then for affiliation. Two-way data binding works by the use of the ng model there. So, and then you interpolate the variable here in the uh, HTML file, and then that's it. So last but not the least is event binding. So I also use event binding through the use of the key press or the input event, which is here. The get the input uh, with the use of get data method found in the TypeScript file. So just like here in the event binding that I've shown you a while ago, once you click the button, I'm sorry, let me refresh it. Yun. Um, There, that's one example of event binding. So the next example is through input forms. So let's try typing and see if the event will be recorded in the console. So let's try typing again something. So as you can see, I typed Rhea and then the input event, it showed on the console. So again, so there, as you can see, I've merged these two, event binding and the two-way data binding. So there, it's working. And then we have it's recording every input on the console. And there you have it. The output for my hands-on exam. So I've covered one-way data binding with the use of interpolation, property binding, style binding, class binding. And then two-way data binding with the use of event binding and the two-way data binding itself. And then lastly, we have the directive, which is ng-for and ng-if. So that's it. Thank you for listening to my demonstration.